Breaking. US aircraft vanish briefly from regional radar. Pentagon stays silent. At 4:42 a.m., the calm sky over the Caribbean broke apart as one of the biggest transport aircraft in the U.S. Inventory dropped fast toward the water. It was a C-5M Super Galaxy, falling from almost 30,000 feet to under 3,000 in minutes. No warning, no transponder, no flight plan, only a short emergency call that cut off halfway. Two F-35Bs from the USS Bataan moved in tight around it, trying to keep the giant steady as it drifted toward the edge of Venezuela's surveillance zone. On the ground, Venezuelan radar stations confirmed the drop and pushed their crews to high alert. Instead of pulling back, the C-5M kept losing altitude along a path that brought it closer to their line of control. Command centers on both sides shifted into emergency mode as the descent grew worse. Analysts later said this wasn't a random engine problem. It looked like a test, a message, or a mission gone wrong. And the more the plane dropped, the clearer it became that someone had miscalculated badly. The reason this event matters is simple. A C-5M Super Galaxy does not fall out of the sky near Venezuela by accident. The Caribbean is one of the busiest military corridors the US uses for moving equipment, special units, and emergency response teams. Every route is planned. Every altitude is calculated. A giant plane showing up without a clear signal is treated as a threat by anyone watching. For Venezuela, the sudden drop of a US aircraft less than 200 miles from its northern coast set off alarms they cannot ignore. Their radar operators see a massive heat signature diving toward their zone, and they have to assume the worst. If something goes wrong, it will happen fast, and they have only seconds to react. For the US, the danger is different. A C-5M is not just another plane. It can carry tanks, helicopters, or high-value teams. Losing it would expose gaps in readiness and weaken the image of American control over the region. That is why the Pentagon watches this area day and night, and why any unusual move can trigger a chain reaction across the entire command network. The early reports suggested that the aircraft had critical cargo on board, the kind of material the US would protect at any cost. When a plane like that falls, commanders assume more than a simple mechanical issue. It could be sabotage, a sensitive mission under pressure, or an attempt by a rival nation to test how fast the US can respond. And on this morning, the risk was doubled because the descent happened inside an area where Venezuelan forces run constant surveillance. Both sides understand the stakes. A mistake here is not just a technical problem. It can shift political pressure, trigger military alerts, and change how countries in the Caribbean react to US movements. If you think this tension could push one side to act first, press 1 for the US or 9 for Venezuela while you subscribe to follow the next moves. This is why the fall of one aircraft turned into a regional crisis before sunrise, and why every radar, every satellite, and every command center locked onto the same target at the same time. The first warning came from a radar room in Puerto Rico. A young technician saw the C-5M's icon dropping faster than anything that size should. At first, he thought it was a glitch, but the altitude numbers kept falling. 30,000, 22,000, 17,000. The room filled with soft alarm tones as systems switched to emergency tracking. No one talked. They only watched the giant fall. Inside the C-5M, the crew fought to keep control. The pilot's voice cracked over the emergency channel as he tried to steady the aircraft, telling the co-pilot to watch engine 2 because the pressure was dropping fast. Warning lights covered the panel. The cockpit shook hard enough that the overhead switches rattled. The radio carried only short, broken words. Hydraulics failing. Left side. Then silence. High above the Caribbean, the two F-35Bs turned sharply toward the falling aircraft. Their pilots saw the C-5M tilting, leaking smoke, and drifting toward the edge of Venezuela's surveillance zone. One pilot called "closing on Atlas now," using its call sign. They moved in tight, their engine heat shaking the C-5M's tail as they tried to keep it steady. On the Venezuelan coast, radar operators saw the same dive. The heat signature grew and pulsed as the C-5M rolled unevenly. An officer stepped in, raised the alert level, and told his team to look for escorts. Seconds later, they spotted the two fighters, confirming something serious was unfolding close to their watch line. As Atlas dropped below 10,000 feet, Puerto Rico Command cleared a classified runway and pushed emergency crews into position. Fire trucks lined up with foam ready. Medical teams rushed forward. A controller repeated the same line into the mic. "Atlas, if you hear me, keep your nose level." No answer came back. The C-5M shook violently as it approached the final stretch. The co-pilot whispered the last numbers he saw on the screen, trying to keep his hands steady. On the ground, crews braced for a crash, a runway skip, or a breakup before impact. Venezuelan command centers reached their own limit. The aircraft was still outside their airspace, but close enough that any mistake could turn into a political crisis. Officers debated whether to activate tracking radar, but the senior commander ordered them to wait for the next update. That short wait felt endless. The final moments of the descent forced both sides to make decisions under pressure, knowing any wrong move could change the entire region. And if you think this first response shows which side handled the crisis better, press 1 for the US or 9 for Venezuela. And subscribe so you don't miss what came next. The moment the C-5M dropped under 5,000 feet, the situation turned from danger to full escalation. The aircraft shook so hard that the tail looked ready to break, and the F-35Bs struggled to guide it without letting it drift into Venezuelan surveillance lines. At this altitude, even a small turn can send a heavy aircraft into a fatal roll, and both fighter pilots knew they were running out of time. In Puerto Rico, the classified runway lit up as emergency crews rushed into place. Foam covered the pavement, and a HH-60G circled low, ready the moment the plane touched down. The C-5M had no room to climb and no power left to slow the fall. If the engines failed completely, it would hit the water before reaching land. Across the water, Venezuelan command watched the unstable descent from their radar stations. The aircraft remained outside their airspace but close enough to trigger serious concerns. A crash near their maritime zone could be seen as a breach or an attempt to hide a deeper operation. Officers argued for seconds at a time, knowing any wrong call could create a crisis neither side could control. Short bursts of electronic interference added more tension. Venezuelan screens flickered, showing patterns linked to advanced U.S. systems. For the officers, it confirmed outside forces were shaping the situation. Losing radar clarity, even briefly, forced them to rely on assumptions. And assumptions during moments like this are dangerous. Inside the C-5M, the cockpit shook as warning lights filled the panel. The pilot called out altitudes while the co-pilot tried to keep the wings level. Every drop felt sharper than the last, and everyone strapped inside knew the plane was coming down faster than it should. As the aircraft approached the last mile, all units braced for impact. Fire crews tightened their lines. The HH-60G hovered close enough to feel the heat from the engines. The F-35Bs eased back to avoid turbulence that could push the C-5M into a hard roll. And in Venezuelan command, the senior officer watched the altitude numbers update, knowing the next few seconds would decide whether this was just an emergency or something far more serious. The Caribbean stayed quiet except for the deep rumble of the damaged aircraft. Every eye focused on the same point in the sky as the C-5M lined up with the runway, carrying the weight of both nations' decisions with it. The twist came fast. Just as the damaged C-5M lined up for landing, satellite trackers spotted another large aircraft coming from the north. When its code flashed, analysts realized it was a second C-5M heading to the same restricted runway. One emergency landing could be an accident. Two heavy transports arriving together meant the first one carried something too valuable to leave exposed. In Puerto Rico, crews preparing for impact suddenly had to make room for another giant. The call spread across the field. Another Atlas inbound. The pilot of the falling C-5M sounded stunned when he heard it. The co-pilot whispered that the mission was bigger than anyone told them. The second aircraft's arrival showed this wasn't only about saving a plane, it was about protecting what was inside it. Across the water, Venezuelan radar stations reacted with the same shock. Officers watched the second signature rise behind the first and argued over its purpose. pickup mission, cargo transfer, or something meant to hide sensitive material, no one agreed. The senior officer told them to track everything and not assume anything because two U.S. giants moving this close to their watch line was far from normal. Then the key detail appeared. Satellite images showed ground teams moving a sealed containment module toward the landing zone. Its shape was clear enough for analysts to recognize it as the type used for medical or classified material. Whatever was inside needed to be moved quickly and kept out of sight. The falling aircraft was not the whole story. It was the cover for a mission already in motion. No one outside top command knew what the module carried, but the twist was clear. This wasn't only an emergency, it was a recovery and a rush to secure critical cargo before any foreign eyes could get close. And if you think this turn shows who is really in control, press 1 for the use or 9 for Venezuela while you subscribe for the next phase. The moment the C-5M crossed the edge of the runway, everyone on the ground felt the tension break open. The aircraft came in too fast, shaking so hard that parts of the tail looked ready to snap. The pilot tried to steady it, but the controls barely answered. From the tower, the controller repeated, "Atlas, keep it level," hoping the crew could still hear him. The giant slammed into the runway with a burst of sparks. It bounced, lifted, then hit again even harder, skidding to the right as smoke poured from the landing gear. Fire crews moved before it stopped, racing along the foam-covered pavement while metal scraped loudly beneath the aircraft. Above them, the F-35B circled low, watching the C-5M slide toward the strip's edge. One pilot radioed, "Atlas is sliding right. Teams move now." Inside the cockpit, the crew fought the skid as warning lights flashed across the panel. The pilot pushed the brakes even though he knew the heat could destroy them. The shaking grew worse as the aircraft dragged across the runway. Then, finally, the movement slowed. The C-5M lurched once, tilted slightly, and came to a full stop just short of the dirt. For a second, everything went silent. Then fire crews rushed under the wings, flooding the engines with foam. The HH-60G dropped lower, medical teams running toward the side door while ground handlers formed a tight wall around the aircraft. Even from a distance, it was clear this was not a standard emergency landing. The guards, the rushed commands, and the way they blocked the view of the cargo made that obvious. Across the sea, Venezuelan command watched the scene unfold through their radar feeds. They saw the descent, the violent touchdown, the guards surrounding the aircraft, and the second C-5M drawing closer behind it. Their screens flickered again with short bursts of interference. The senior officer said nothing. He simply watched, understanding that if this had been a simple accident, the US would not be deploying this level of protection. The climax of the morning ended with a wounded giant sitting on the runway while two nations monitored the same spot. One mistake could still turn the rescue into a confrontation. And if you believe this moment showed which side held the advantage, press 1 for the US or 9 for Venezuela while you subscribe to stay with the final chapter. When the C-5M finally stopped and the smoke faded, it was clear the crisis was not ending. The aircraft was damaged but still intact, and within minutes the second C-5M arrived over the field, confirming that this was not just an emergency landing. Ground crews formed a tight security ring, blocking every angle of the runway as armed guards pushed back anyone without clearance. Across the Caribbean, the ripples spread fast. Venezuelan forces stayed on high alert, tracking both aircraft and trying to understand why two of the largest U.S. transports were operating so close to their watch line. Some analysts called it a transfer, others a recovery mission. With radar interference still hitting their screens, no one inside their command center felt sure about anything. In Puerto Rico, the second C-5M touched down smoothly and teams moved quickly between the two giants. Containers and sealed modules were shifted under low light, watched closely by guards. The speed of the operation made one thing obvious. Whatever was inside the first C-5M needed to be secured before anyone else could get near it. By sunrise, the damaged aircraft had been repaired enough to fly. It lifted off slowly, escorted by the same F-35Bs that guided it through the fall. The second C-5M followed behind. Both giants left the island without a single statement from the Pentagon, leaving only radar logs and satellite images to explain what happened. Venezuela issued a formal complaint, calling the event a military intrusion. The U.S. stayed silent, refusing to reveal the cargo or the mission. The landing showed one clear message: the U.S. can run a high-risk recovery operation in the Caribbean even under pressure and surveillance. If you think this ending shows who truly holds the advantage after a night like this, press 1 for the US or 9 for Venezuela while you subscribe to follow what comes next.